Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy AA2 for20, bring you guys my BBL Draft Analysis. Now, of course, I know I mentioned this in my update video earlier, but for this season of the BBL, I am actually taking on a new team name because I can do whatever I want in my own league, so I don't need to worry about like making it a serious team name. So we're going with, and this is actually a team I've had for a while now. I've had this since MWPA Season 4 started up. Actually, I've had, well, yeah, because that's when I made the logo, because I remember I made the initial logo in Call. Then I had Bill touch it up because I wanted to look a little bit more professional since I was going to be uploading for it. I've also used this in GSA, which not an upload league, but it's just another league I've used it in, which is the Dunkingdra Donuts. I'm hoping they'll one day sponsor me, the actual Dunkin' Donuts that is. This is my way to make sure that they only sponsor me even more. So hopefully it works out, fingers crossed. But yeah, without further ado, let's get started with the draft analysis. Of course, if you guys do enjoy or whatever, you know, leave a like down below. Leave your predictions for our season down below as well. And yeah, otherwise, I'm gonna also link to the BBL. Actually, I don't want to link to the BBL doc because that'll have records soon. But I will at the very least link to all the coaches down below, linked in the description below. You should check them all out, all phenomenal coaches. We wouldn't have added them if I didn't think they were going to at least hold their own this season. And yeah, let's get right into the draft analysis, I guess. So we had the 8th pick in the draft, and there was one mon in particular. There's actually two things. I knew for a fact that Ash really wanted Mega Blaziken, and he was picked right after me, and I did not want to be the guy that sniped Ash after he told me what he wanted originally. I didn't want to be that guy. I told him, if my other pick options got taken, I'm sniping you. But somehow, with 8th pick, neither of my options went. I was originally going to get Groudon or Arceus-Fire. Groudon because I had wrecked House with it in Speed Tour earlier, in like about a month ago. I 4-0'd and 5-0'd every single person in that Speed Tour. Of course, that was also Z Groudon, but I only brought Z to like one game. I brought Berry to the other two. Like I brought Yachi Berry one game. I think I brought like Pasho Berry another. I brought some sort of berry. That's all I remember. And then I remember one game I brought Z Groudon, but I never clicked the Z move as far as I remember. I don't think I did. But anyway, point being though is that Z Groudon had Z been allowed, that would have definitely been my first pick regardless. But ultimately, I decided I was going to go with Arceus-Fire. Now, everyone loves Mew in format and mons like Mew, Jirachi, etc. because they have 100 base all around. Now imagine if you had a mon that has 120 base all around. That's what Arceus is. And even though it's locked to one type, even though I can only hold one item, well, two if I made it a Z-Mon, but I'm not going to pay 22 Z points to only use Fire Emblem Z for a Z Pokemon. So, spoilers, this is not one of our Z-Mons. I'll actually get into those later on. There are a lot of Z-Mons we actually have in the team. We have 4 different ones. And basically, long story short, Z rules, we had 30 Z points. It costs just as much as Z as it did to draft Pokemon. So, because of that, that plays into certain suggestions that we had for our Z pool, and I'll get into it a little more with the next pick because it does make a lot more sense with the next pick why certain mons are Z'd. But anyway, Arceus-Fire has pretty much every move in the game. It doesn't have everything. For example, it doesn't have Rapid Spin, which sucks because that would be a very nice way to just clear houses on only my side. But we still do get Defog with it. This is our first Stealth Rocker, and having Stealth Rocks is already great, especially on such an offensive Pokemon, as a lot of things that would otherwise be Rockers, such as Steel types or Ground types, I have coverage for. Of course, with Judgment, I can handle most Steel types with Rocks. I can handle Ground and Rock types with coverage, just Ice Beam or Energy Ball. Of course, I also get Recovery, and I get Self Cleric. I can't get Heal Bell, of course, which kind of sucks, same as Aromatherapy. However, I do have Refresh, which at the very least clears Thunder Waves on myself, also clears Toxics. I can't get Burn, which is nice, but that way then I'm not Toxic stalled if I'm trying to run, let's say, a bulky Combine Arceus. This thing, of course, does have pretty much every coverage move in the game. It obviously doesn't get like everything, such as, for example, it doesn't get like V-Create, Bolt Strike, etc. But it gets coverage for pretty much every type. So that's in itself phenomenal. As I said, I told this to Matt actually, because before I actually knew that I was going to play Matt, it was like round 2 in the draft, and I was like, you know, unless you draft yourself like a Heatran or a Magnet, oh actually no, it was literally I think like Heatran and like Rotom Wash, I think. No, not even that. I think it's literally just when I get Heatran and like a couple other mons such as like Rotom Wash. If you run like Bolt Beam plus Fire coverage, it hits pretty much everything, for at the very least super effective. Besides like Heatran, for example, would be immune to fire, resist ice, and neutral to electric. I know, for example, let's see, it would hit Palkia for neutral at most. It would hit... There's very few mons, though, that want to take, like, a Judgment plus a Blizzard plus a Thunder. And this thing gets all three. So, it's not only that, but it also, of course, has set up in several ways, such as Calm Mind, which is probably his best way. It also gets Sword Stance, of course. Has priority as well in E-Speed, and while it's not in Stab, E-Speed is still +2 priority, so it's outspeeding most other priority users, such as Ice Shards or Mach Punches. So if I very well needed to, I could always just run a physical Arceus and go for extreme speed, which is very nice, of course. So, yeah. Arceus, though, has a lot going for it. Hell, I can even take... I was EVing for week 1. Spoiler alert, I play the Puffy Pachirisu week 1, coached by Sparks the God. And I remember running Calcs on this thing. And his ground type being Gliscor, even if it's an Adamant Max Attack Gliscor, it 2-hit KOs this thing no matter what without any bulk invested. So, of course, that just shows how fat Arceus is. Ridiculously fat mon. Love it. I'm shocked that this thing made it to 8th pick. It should have probably been pick 1, in my opinion. Of course, pick 1 went to Mewtwo, which is another very, very phenomenal mon. Can't be Z'd, however, but again, very phenomenal mon. However, I do think Arceus-Fire was probably the best thing allowed, and I somehow got an 8th pick, so I'm happy with that. Its nickname, of course, is going to be Arceus-Burn, because originally when I had this team, I had my old front office, and Burn was a member of my front office. He helped a lot in past seasons of other leagues, of course, such as D-League and earlier with the BBL draft. So I let him pick out the nickname. He wanted Arceus-Burn. Simple as that. Next up, we have Bulge-O-O, our Palkia. Now, Palkia was a mon that I figured I could have probably gotten a little later on, not gonna lie, as Palkia was very rarely ever drafted in Speed Tours. However, I was very, very concerned about letting this thing fall too late, as one, it has a very unique typing in Water Dragon. Nothing else will fill that void in the entire allow list. I'm fairly certain there's no other Water Dragons around, correct me if I'm wrong. Oh wait, no, Kingdra. Kingdra is the only other one, but I don't want to pair Kingdra as my Water type because it's not bulky, whereas Palkia is pretty damn thick. So, Palkia, this was on the candidate board for Zmon. However, later on in the draft, my 3 Pokemon that I was considering for Z the most, I couldn't have Z'd any of them with Palkia. Whereas I could Z, no matter what, I could at least Z 2 of them with each other, and still Z a couple other mons that were like 1 or 2 point that I picked later on, and I'll get to those more as they come. So if I did Z Palkia, I would have literally been limited to like Diancie or Medicham Z mons, which I'll get into those later on. But I would have been limited to those Z mons as opposed to my other much greater Z mons that I did choose later on. So that was why I didn't go for Z Palkia, as of course I do have a lot of other items I can run, such as Berry, Leftovers, AV, Specs, Scarf, you name it. Palkia pretty much makes anything work. Hell, even as 120 physical attack, I can run Banna Palkia if I want to. This thing, speaking of physical, it also gets bulk up for setup, which in my opinion is a little underrated because this thing actually has a really solid physical move pool. Sadly, I don't think it gets any special setup that I'm aware of, so that does suck in terms of special move pool. However, 150 special attack is still breaking through a lot of teams. And this thing does have really solid coverage too. Water Dragon hits a lot of Pokemon in general. And having this thing be my bulky water with Arceus is really solid, as I do have other support in terms of Cleric in my draft later on. So that'll help get my Palkia recovered back up. And yeah, I felt like though, of course, not only that, but the speed tier is really solid, base 100. Every draft should have at least a couple of those base 100 mons. In my opinion, they're very, very vital to a draft team. And of course, having that right off the bat was such a fat mon as well. I was speeding pretty much everything in the allow list besides like Arceus form, Shaven Sky, Blazikins after +1, Greninjas. But even then, like a lot of those mons, this can get you hits from, for the most part. Even Darkrai as well can shoot hits from. So a lot of things such as like Giratina, Dialga, etc. Those sorts of mons that could actually like break this thing are all slower, and I can break them right back pretty easily because Dragon super effective against Dragon. They need to be running Habanberry, but even then, with 2 Spatial Rens, I can kill pretty much anything in terms of the Dragon type allow list. As unlike Dracos, which most other Dragons would rely on, Spatial Ren not only has a high crit ratio to get around the base 100 move in general, but also 2, I do not lower my special attack with Spatial Ren. And while it is 95% accurate, it's going to hit pretty much every time. And being able to not worry about having to lose my special attack is a huge benefit in my opinion, especially with a move that hits so many of the fattest mons that are allowed, such as Giratina, Dialga, Zekrom, Reshiram, etc. Those are all pretty fat mons that are all weak to Dragon. Overall, though, since a lot of Ubers are Dragon Week, I figured really solid pickup for such a fat mon as well that also has really solid speed. Now, third off, before I get into my next pick, I really was thinking, I was planning this since pick 1. The second I got Arceus-Fire, I was like, okay, I know my 3 Ubers I'm gonna get. There was 3 Ubers I was originally gonna get. I decided to only go with 2 after this mon was sniped. It literally got taken 4 picks before me by fucking Flame Horizon. And apparently Matt was also going to snipe this the very pick before me. So shoutouts to you both. You're both cucks for sniping me on that Aegislash. Aegislash would have been so broken with this because I would have gotten like Floridas or Clefable later on. Clefable got sniped by Quinn in literally the wheel pick going into the round that Aegislash got sniped. Not only that, but I was also then, once Aegislash went, I was like, okay, you know, it's fine. I'll just use the points I saved on that to go for Lando T, which then Matt takes literally the pick before. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, I really want a physical mon. Of course, Aegislash could have been mixed, which was the ideal benefit for that. Also had really solid bulk and just overall so much diversity to it. Would have forced a lot of really weird prep with the 2 mons I already have already. But since Lando T went, I was like, okay, I really want a physical mon. I want a physical breaker. And I decided I'm going to go with Mega Mawile, aka Mega Jesus. This one was named, of course, if you couldn't tell, by Jesus in my front office, or formerly in my front office. So, Mega Jesus, of course, while being a slow mon, it sort of worked with a couple other things I'll get into later on in the draft. But it does cover the physical breaking aspect. Of course, pre-Mega, I do get Intimidate as well, which Lando T would have given me. I do get Rocks, which again, Lando T would have given me, so it does fill those 2 roles. Though, Mega Mawile, unlike Lando T, really can't pull off Rocks in most games, so it probably won't be a rocker commonly. But if I need to, I mean, in preseason, it actually was my rocker in a couple games. And by the way, let me know down below if you guys want to see the preseason games. I'm more than happy to get them and then upload them on the channel. In terms of Mega Mawile, though, really solid coverage. Steel Fairy hits a lot of Pokemon. And while, of course, Steel types, for example, will wall this, it does have coverage for Steel types such as Fire and Thunder Punch. Well, it has Fire Fang, also has Thunder Punch and Thunder Fang. Ice Fang as well, and Ice Punch, I believe. Has priority in Sucker Punch too, so second priority mon right off the bat. And if I get a sub up with Mega Mawile, this thing can even run like a sub punch set to break through Steel types, which is very terrifying, as most counters to Mega Mawile would be weak to fighting, while they're also going to still resist like Steel Fairy. Things such as Bronzong, well, not Bronzong because that's actually neutral to fighting, but things like Mega Aggron, for example, this thing could 2-hit KO Mega Aggron with a focus punch behind a sub. So it's very terrifying physical mon. Even most physical walls cannot take it on, and especially if you can get it to +2, this thing will shred through any physical wall pretty much, as long as you get the right coverage for it. So, right off the bat, though, of course, I did mention the speed is off point on this thing. 1, I do have Trick Room with Palkia. 2, I believe Arceus-Fire might actually get Trick Room as well. I might be wrong on that. I do at the very least have Tailwind with Arceus, though, to speed it up. And my next pick, actually, I think it was my next pick. If not, it was the pick after. But I do have an option as well around the slowness of this mon, and to help boost mons such as Palkia, of course, that's at base 100. That'll actually be my 5th pick. But 4th up, I got myself Superior. This was a mon I originally didn't end up actually planning on my draft. I was actually going to get a lower tier grass type, not gonna lie, but once I decided on not getting Aegislash, I had saved a couple points that I decided I might as well use these points to just get a higher tier grass type. As with how my team was budgeting out from a lot of snipes, it sort of worked best to get Superior. This thing does give me a 113 base speed tier, which is going to be nice for outspeeding 110s, and it's going to help cover the gap between Palkia and Arceus-Fire. Has really solid bulk as well, at least for an offensive mon such as Superior, with 75, 95, 95. Of course, I also do get recovery through Seeds and Synthesis as well. Subseed, I know tons of people use Subseed. It's a really solid set to get around a lot of checks to Superior, as you can get a sub up, Leech Seed to get recovery back as your opponent's going to break your sub, then just start spamming sub as you drain their health real quick, and then eventually just kill them off with Leaf Storm, boost yourself up as well, and then just start sweeping through a team. Now, another thing also, oh, by the way, this thing is named Dojo the Plant, again, after another front office member who is no longer with us. In terms of this thing's coverage, it doesn't have the best coverage, but Dragon Pulse, which this thing does get, helps work through a lot of dragons, which, as I said, a lot of dragons were added to the allow list. So the dragon typing is a really essential typing to have, and the fact that this thing has coverage for dragons is really solid. Also, HP Fire is really nice to work through most steals. Also, of course, HP Fighting could be a nice substitute depending on the mashup. I also do have Leaf Storm, of course, which is very nice, as I said, it's my main way of boosting. But if I'm ever in like a meme match again, I could just run like, I could run like, for example, an Overgrow set with Coil. If I ever felt like it, as it probably would only be in like a meme match or something, but does have the option, of course, and you know, this thing would pair really nicely with Palkia and Arceus-Fire. That does make my Fire Water Grass core very special heavy. However, my Steel Dragon Fairy core with Palkia Mega Mawile is definitely a lot more physical oriented, at least in terms of the Mega Mawile aspect. It helps bring up my physical offense, and a couple other picks later on do help with physical offense as well, especially my next pick, which actually is Bridgestone, our Scolipede. And Scolipede helps a lot with the speed aspect, as I mentioned. It helps Baton Pass speed in Mega Mawile and Palkia already. Plus 1 speed Palkia, especially if it has a boosting item offensively. Very, very little wants to take from that. You'll see in our Week 1 match, actually, it's a very, very terrifying mon to play. I am bringing both of them, of course, because Baton Pass is broken, and might as well just make the most of it. With 112 speed as well, if you can get to plus 1 speed, this thing could even sweep on its own, as it would outspeed most potential Scarfers. There are very few Scarfers that would want to outspeed this. Really, one of the only things around it would be priority from things such as like a Talonflame. Fake Out, of course, you could just switch out and in, and then just sack mons while you then get Fake Outs off, and then just go for Quick Attack with something like Mega Lop, or even just as a Fake Out spam is really nice versus Scolipede. However, I do have a lot of ways around potential Fake Out or Brave Bird spam from a Talonflame, with things such as Mega Mawile. Arceus-Fire can chew through most hits anyway. Palkia, of course, Bulky Water, really solid. So in terms of covering priority, I do have that covered. This thing also does end up actually being one of our Z-Mons. If I had Z this thing, I was not able to Z Palkia, so I figured that this plus a later Mon, I believe around 7 pick, I figured those were probably my best Z options. Round 6 pick could have also been a Z option, but I'll get into that when we get to it. But overall though, I felt like Z Scolipede, as I said, Scolipede really doesn't need the Z move, whereas my Palkia can run a lot of other items. Scolipede, and if it ever wants to be more than just a baton passer, in most cases I'm going to want this thing to be a Z. If I'm going to run it in terms of having Scolipede be our offensive mon, I'm going to want it Z. Because it really, like base 100 attack, unless if I'm running like some sort of Life Orb SD set, which again, if I was running SD and I did set up an SD, that does limit our options in terms of if Scolipede got low, I can't just baton pass the speed out, as it is speed or other stats in BBL, which does, it's kind of a double-edged sword, because if I set up an SD, I'm forced to hard swap, which is a little bit unfortunate for Scolipede, which is another reason I would want to run a Z move, because at the very least I could try and nuke something before sacking Scolipede, especially if I do get to +2, because then I can just click Z move and then just hope for the best. So our 6th pick, this was another mon. I really just wanted like one last really solid breaker, because I figured our draft, the way that I saw it, a lot of other options for mons, such as like a Crook, for example, I really wanted both a Dark and a Ground type at this point in the draft. And Crook was taken, a lot of other ground types I was considering were taken, such as Gliscor. So I was very indifferent on what I wanted. And ultimately I decided I was going to get my Dark type this round, because for reasons that I will get into round 8, there was a ground type on the board that I didn't see people taking, because it's one of those ground types that it's low points, but at the same time it was so low cost in points that because of something I'll get into when we get to the round 8 pick, that it was too much of a steal to not get it. So because of that, I decided, okay, since I'm not going to be able to get my ground type just yet, because it would be way too early to pick it if I got it round 6, way too early. So I figured I might as well just get my Dark type, because I want to get something that will be a solid knockoff user to like Fast Psychics, as besides Scolipede, Fast Psychics that have like setups such as like Calm Mind Reuniclus. I also do have to worry about like Crest, for example. My team doesn't have the best ways around that. As I said, I have a Scolipede, but that's really about it. So ultimately, I decided next up I was going to get Fruit Hoops, our Hoopa-Unbound. Now, Hoopa-Unbound is a very, very solid breaker with base 80 speed, so it's going to take a lot of advantage of the Scolipass, and it also has 160 attack and 170 special attack, which is extremely amazing in terms of just trying to break through any sort of wall with Hoopa-Unbound. You can run this thing mixed, of course, and hell, this thing even has a really solid special defense stat with 130 in special defense. Now, one thing that Hoopa classically has to worry about is any sort of momentum with the U-turn, because that will instant OHKO any Hoopa if you're not running a Tanga Berry, and if you're running a Tanga Berry, you're essentially limiting yourself in terms of how much damage you can do offensively. So that's very unfortunate in terms of Hoopa's typing. At the same time though, Psychic Dark is a really solid offensive typing. It does get knockoff, of course, which is very nice, as stab knockoff is always something, and is very, very vital in my opinion to a draft success. this thing, as I said, base 80 speed. It's going to, at +1 speed from Scolipede, at level 50 as well, it's a lot better to be a base 80 speed tier, because if you get to +1, you're actually outspeeding mons such as Mega Beedrill, whereas at level 100, you would be just under by 1. So for Hoops, having that base 80 speed with our speed pass is very, very solid. At +2 speed, we're outspeeding pretty much everything. And what mons are you going to actually want to switch in on a Hoopa if you're trying to switch in a Scarfer? You're going to sack something and then bring in your Scarfer if we even get to +1 speed. So those on their own are already very solid merits with Hoopa. Also, the base 80 speed tier helps at the very least patch the giant gap between Mega Mawile and I believe Palkia will be our next fastest mon at base 100. So anything that was like base 80, for example, could always run like an Adamant Nature on Mega Mawile if they were trying to creep that. Things such as like EQ Dragonite, now they can no longer afford to run that, because if I ran a Timid Hoopa or a Jolly Hoopa and got to +1 speed, I'm going to outspeed them anyway, even if they were like a base 80 Scarfer and we're just running like an Adamant or a Modest Nature. So those on their own are already really solid merits by Hoopa-Unbound in terms of my draft, and I feel like this thing will put in a lot of work. 7th pick, I realized I wanted a flying type because mons such as Arceus-Fire and Mega Mawile were very Earthquake weak, and a couple other things later on I was starting to look at, such as potential rockers, as right now my only rockers are Mega Mawile and Arceus-Fire. So those sort of mons that I was planning on later on in the draft were very, very, very ground weak, and because of that, I really wanted a flying type that would help be immune to that. So I got myself Harvey, our Tornadus-I. Tornadus-I has been a mon I've actually had on my list to draft for such a long time, and this is sort of the team that just worked for it. This is our other Z-mon. The reason I didn't Z Hoopa was because choice items are probably going to be my most likely item, if not like berries, or even like a Life Orb or Expert Belt. All work very well in Hoopa. Torn, though, however, with the Z move, can actually get around a lot of low accuracy moves, such as Heat Wave. Well, Heat Wave is not very low accuracy, but still a little bit. But things such as Focus Blast. Also Superpower if I don't want to lower my attack. There's also Hurricane, of course, that might not want to miss. And even Air Slash, it's just such an inferior move in terms of damage output, and still has a chance to miss anyway. So things such as like Z Hurricane are really nice. This thing also does get momentum, which is extremely solid, as U-Turn is going to be insanely nice for a pivot that is just speed creeping base 110s. So as a Scarf set, this thing is going to outspeed pretty much anything that would normally run a Scarf. Of course, this thing can also take advantage of my Scully pass, and with a Z move, and I could just run like a bulk up set, physically it will just Recklise. Even if I run, I don't think this thing gets special setup, sadly, which is very unfortunate, as I know like Thundy, for example, gets a nasty plot. So that's very unfortunate. I can't just like get to +2 and then just start spamming Z Hurricane or normal Hurricane or Focus Blast versus his team, or versus anyone else's team, I should say. However, this thing still does have a nice 125 special attack, so it's going to be plowing through teams regardless. In terms of coverage, this thing hits pretty much everything it would need to. Has coverage for mons that would resist flying, such as through moves like Focus Blast. As I said, this thing also actually I didn't say, but this thing also is another knockoff user, which we have Mega Mawile as well for, and then Hoopa for actual stab knockoff. If this thing also does give us another defogger, I forgot to mention we do have Serp for defog, and now we also have Arceus-Fire and Tornadus-I as defoggers. So very, very solid in that regard. This thing, I believe, also does get Defiant as a hidden ability. I forget I forget Torn's hidden ability. I know it gets Prankster's normal ability, which means that Prankster defog is going to be very, very nice. Sadly, it does not have recovery through Roost, which is very, very unfortunate, but we'll get around it. It's fine. This was only like 11 points, so for the points here, it was very, very worth having Tornadus-I. And yeah, I'm hoping it puts in a lot of work. I have a lot of high hopes, especially after seeing people such as Goldoa use it recently. And yeah, next up, we get into the Steela draft. Now, I'd like to point out before getting this, this thing was picked really early for the mon, not early for the cost, because we actually forgot to put it in the dock. We copied this off the NPL dock. We copied all the tiers and then readjusted as we made adjustments. So I don't know how this thing was missed, because it was actually still on the NPL dock. However, for some reason, it wasn't on our dock. So we ended up getting a round 8 Pillow Swine, aka Dustin King. This thing was 1 point because it was not on the dock for some fucking reason. We checked the dock for months through Speed Tours, so the fact that no single person has pointed it out for this long really blows my mind. But Dustin King within a Violite, of course, we have 100 HP and 80 defense and 60 speed death. Very, very solid in their own right. Of course, the thing also has 100 physical attack. Another rocker, and this thing is actually a really solid stealth rocker. I can fit it pretty much every week onto Dustin. Of course, Dustin also has ice ground coverage, which is very, very solid in terms of hitting a lot of things. Of course, ice types ice moves hit ground type, hit flying types, which would be immune to the ground stab. This thing also gets rock moves such as Stone Edge and Rock Slide, which hit other flying types as well. if, let's say, they were mons such as Pelipper, for example, which would resist my ice. This thing does get Freeze Dry too as well, I believe, so that, again, helps with the mons that would resist ice. Really just water types, I guess, so that's very nice in their own right. Even with a Violate, this thing is going to chew through a lot of hits, even though it does have low stats. So this thing can plow through a lot of mons that would otherwise wall it, or even just try and sit and just Toxic Saw. So getting rocks up with this mon as well is another thing. It's very easy because, again, of its natural bulk. I don't need to run something like a Sash, for example, whereas for Mamoswine, I would probably need to run a Sash if I was playing against a really offensive team. However, with Dustin King, I don't need to worry about that. And yeah, I figured Thick Fat also helps a lot because our team is very weak to Ice plus Fire. And a couple other mons, again, a little weak to Ice and Fire. In terms of Ice weakness, we have Torrent, Superior, and we don't have any resist besides Mawile. And in terms of our Fire weakness, we have Serp, Scolipede, and Mawile, all weak to Fire. I figured that Thick Fat, of course, does help with that as well. So yeah, I figured really solid pickup with Dustin King. I'm hoping it puts in a lot of work. I'm really having high hopes for it. Now, in terms of our next pick, we got ourselves Blunder, the Medicham. I figured that if we're going to run Baton Pass, this thing has base 80 speed, and it has one hell of a physical wall breaking ability for 7 points. So, also gives me a low-cost fighting type, which I do love low-cost fighting types. And I'm surprised, this is one of the few low-cost fighting types that I've actually never drafted before. And I figured on Baton Pass, this is probably my ideal situation too. This thing also does have setup, of course, through bulk up, and at +1, almost nothing wants to take a hit for this thing. Even Fat Psychics, I was calculating again, week 1, I calc this thing, +1 attack. This thing 2 kills Fizz Def or Uniclus with a Life Orb High Jump Kick. So just to put that into perspective of how fat this, well, in terms of how much this thing wall breaks at +1, even without +1, this thing still does put in a lot of pressure. Like a Uniclus, if it switched in and then switched out to get regen boost, it would be losing HP every time it switched in. So again, really solid in terms of physical wall breaking. That's of course just Reuniclus, but Reuniclus is probably one of the better Fat Psychics in terms of walling fighting types such as this or things like Mega Lop. But again, we're drafting Medicham, so I'm doing calcs for Medicham. This thing of course does have really killer coverage in terms of things like Ice Punch, Thunder Punch, High Jump Kicks, Zen Headbutt, really solid moves. It does have priority as well with Fake Out and Bullet Punch, so again, another priority user. Forgot to mention we do a Pillow Swine with priority as well with Ice Shard. But yeah, our team's really priority heavy, mainly because our speed tiers are also a little slow. We do peak at Arceus-Fire, and 120 is definitely better than our D-League speed tiers. And we do have a lot of other ways around speed than just Trick Room and Baton Pass. Well, Trick Room and Tailwind, as we do also have Baton Pass in this team. And I could even pick up Webs later on. I'm still considering if I want to pick up Webs later on with free agents. But for now, we're going to keep what we have. So yeah, overall though, I feel like Blunder is going to be a really solid add to our team. Really looking forward to using it this season. And next up, we got ourselves Rachel the Diancie. Rachel, of course, biggest fan, so I figured might as well name it after her. We do have really solid offensive with Rachel being 100 in both offenses. Not the best coverage, but I mean, Rock Fairy hits pretty well. Diamond Storm, of course, is a very solid move. Boosts our defense by +1 or +2, depending on the rolls. Another Stealth Rocker, of course. As I mentioned, we did pick up another Stealth Rocker later on. This and Pillow Swine are going to be my primary rockers, chances are, but I do have Arceus-Fire and Mega Mawile later on, should I need to. Another Trick Room user as well. I forgot to mention Hoopa does get Trick Room as well. So you do actually have multiple Trick Room users, whereas otherwise, for example, in my D-League draft, again, if I wanted to bring Trick Room, I had to bring Bronzong. If I wanted to bring Tailwind, I had to bring Decidueye or Archeops or Hydreigon. Now it's just Decidueye. Now it's just Hydreigon and Archeops. Whereas now I have 2 different Tailwinders, I have 1 Baton Passer, and I also have like 4 different Trick Room setters. So I do have a lot of ways around speed this time around. So our speed is also, again, better speed tiers as well, so that does help a lot. Also, this thing is a really solid mixed wall. My walls aren't the best right now. I do have like Pillow Swine is one of my better walls. Palkia is, again, a really solid wall. Arceus-Fire is probably like one of my higher up walls, surprisingly, as I did draft it for an offensive Pokemon. But, I mean, Rachel's still really solid in terms of being a mon that can just chew through hits. With berries, this thing can actually chew through like a Banded Earthquakes from mons. I remember I calculated this thing for a Banded Earthquake and from Ho-Oh and a Specs Earth Power from Kyurem White in my preseason game versus Flame, and it took both of them with a Shuca Berry and could revenge off either mon if I needed to. So very, very solid bulk. I think that Rachel's going to put in a lot of work, and I cannot wait to use her this season. Now next up, we actually got ourselves such an unmon that, oh boy. So we had 3 points left in our draft. I was indifferent. Originally, I was going to get Manectric with this pick, actually. And then Burn pointed out, I originally actually kind of wanted Gumshoes later on. And I'll get into that, pick 12. But I was like, you know, I really want to use Gumshoes. I think we're going to do a lot of speed tiering in terms of speed creeping with Trick Room and also, well, speed initiative, I should say, with controlling our speed with things such as Trick Room and Baton Pass. I wanted Gumshoes. I figured it would be a really solid breaker for like 2 points. And also, I love low tier normal types as well. Normal type memes are my favorite type of memes in terms of draft format. So then Burn pointed out to me that I can get that and my fast electric type if I wanted to get this mon. So I decided with the coverage, it would be much better than Manectric's coverage. The speed is a little worse, but I can manage. It does fill our gap between 180, which I otherwise would have had, as Manectric would have been 105 speed, and I do have that gap patch with Superior and Tornadus-I and things like that. So I ultimately decided on the mascot pick of the franchise with Godslayer, our Pikachu. Now this thing is Ash Pikachu in the layout. It could be Ash, it really doesn't matter. Ash Pikachu just loses out a move, so if anything, it just reveals that I have less potential options. Now, if you look at this mon, this thing has shit stats besides speed. But if you give this thing a Light Ball, it instantly goes to, holy shit, it's breaking through a lot of mons. With options such as Volt Tackle and Thunder for really high base power electric moves. And this thing does double its offenses. So, to put it this way, Azu has base 50 attack with pure power. This thing has basically 5 more attack with the Light Ball, and then it's going to double that. So, it's going to hit harder than Azu physically, of course, assuming that it's like an AV Azu and wouldn't be having like a band, because banded Azu would obviously hit harder as it does have huge power and then also a way of boosting its attack. And not only that, but it does get the boost for its special offense as well, so this does give us diversity. Pikachu through all of its events has a lot of coverage, such as Surf, Fly, Extreme Speed. Well, Extreme Speed's not really coverage, but it does give us priority, which we also do have Fake Out and Quick Attack for priority, which is very, very nice. This thing literally should have been Electric Normal, as it would have had very nice stab priority in things like E-Speed, Fake Out, Quick Attack, etc. Now, this thing also does give us another Electric immunity, which I feel very solid with, because even though our team is very, very little weak to Electric, having Pillow-Swine as my Volt Switch is a little bit risky, so I do now also have Pikachu, and while Pikachu is a very, very risky switching as well, at least I have another risky switching. So if I'm not bringing Pillow-Swine to a game and I'm bringing Pikachu instead, I have more options now. Though this thing definitely shouldn't be my switching, and if I'm banking on it as a switching, then something is very wrong, and you should probably check if I'm blinking twice in that game, I guess. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, Godslayer is just going to break through these Ubers. I figured if I'm going to draft Pikachu ever, it might as well be in an Ubers League where it's going to slay through things like it does in the anime. Now for our last pick, I already mentioned this, but we got ourselves Looker, the Gumshoes. With base 110 attack, and this thing also does get adaptability, Banded Returns are going to break through so many things. It also gets coverage for steel types such as Earthquake, and Fire Fang, I believe, also gets Superpower if I'm not mistaken. So it does have ways around those. Pursuit is also really nice because with Stakeout is going to boost attacks if Pokemon switches out. Pursuit is already going to boost itself as it is, so that's going to be very nice as well. Things like Return also get that boost. So this thing does have 2 really solid abilities. Even Strong Jaw is an okay ability, I guess, though more than likely I probably would run that one the least. But for a 2-point mon with such solid abilities and 1-time attack, this thing is going to be really solid on a team that does have a lot of options in terms of manipulating speed in my favor. Things like Trick Room, Baton Pass, Tailwind. So I'm really hoping for Looker to put in a lot of work. This also does help with a lot with physical offense, as my team is very special offense heavy. As I said, I do have Arceus-Fire, Palkia, Superior, Tornadus-I, Hoopa. Hoopa can be both, but still more special. Whereas in terms of physical, I do have Mega Mawile, I have Hoopa as well, Scolipede, I have Medicham, and now I have Gumshoes. Pikachu I'm not counting because it needs Light Ball, and it's probably going to be brought to like 1 game, but that 1 game I'm going to put in a lot of work with it. And yeah, I'm really hoping for Looker to put in a lot of work this season, though I have high hopes for Looker as well. Now, that is going to be it for our BBL draft analysis. Let me know what your favorite pick is down below. Let me know what you would change, what you would keep. Leave season predictions as well. Leave either just season record predictions or even who you think we're going to beat and lose to. If you guys did enjoy, leave a like down below, and I will see you guys in the next video. Peace out.